Well, if you've been here before, you know this is the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. A retired police officer and detective in Utah, Scott Christopher, found comfort in two things when life got tough: motorcycles and writing. He details his journey in his book entitled Riding the Blue Line.
You know, it didn't start out as a book. And so, I started writing down just anecdotes about different things, at the behest of my wife, because, I talked about my friend in the book, one of my best friends who passed away, and I started writing. And then at one point, it seemed that I came up to about 50 to 60,000 words. I let my wife read it, and she said, you should continue on. And so I kind of, added some more things, because as I wrote, I found that writing was just not part of the story. I had to put in there why I started to write, and that was the law enforcement portion of it. And next thing I knew, it was done. And my wife said, well, give it a shot, see what happens if you put it out there and see what people think. And so, that happened just, early last year.
You never wrote before?
Not that type of stuff. I've written hundreds or thousands of search warrants and police reports, but I've never written a book. No, the closest thing I ever came is right after my best friend passed away. The old American Iron magazine that's no longer being printed since COVID, I sent a letter to the editor about my friend, and they printed that. But other than that, no, nothing like this.
What happened to your friend?
My friend had a heart attack, and he ended up passing away. He was several years older than I was. We kind of met through law enforcement. He was a retired deputy chief of police, but we had a similar interest in motorcycles, and we had a similar group of friends. And over the years, we would ride together. And in the end, as the years went on, less and less people would ride with us. And the final probably 6 or 7 years, and especially that's in the book and my writing, it was me and him that would usually go on rides and go explore different roads and parts of the Western United States. And, it just was one of those things we really had in common and we really enjoyed.
And this was how you relieved the stress of the job.
That, yes. And I think part of the writing was almost therapeutic in some ways. I think it helped me deal with my friend's death, because, learning to ride again, like a lot of people and a lot of things they do in their life, they may have some type of tragedy that comes along, maybe it be a death or an accident or something, and can they do it again? Can they pick up the paintbrush, or can they get back behind the wheel? Whatever it is, it was kind of the same for me for a few months. And because I really hadn't, I'm blessed that my parents are still alive. And, I really hadn't dealt with the death of someone that close to me, even in the job. I've had some close calls, and I've had people that have been severely injured. But most of the people that I knew in law enforcement that had passed away had died from other causes outside of the job. So this is really the first time I had faced the death of someone that close to me. And I think that the writing helped that.
Yeah, it's been said. It's very therapeutic. So how do you lay out your book?
It's kind of almost like people in the film industry or movie industry. My daughter's a local actress here in the area, so I use a lot of acronyms like that. And I know when people like film a movie or whatever, they say they don't do things necessarily in a linear or in a timeline. And I wrote out that way. I remember sitting down and writing about one of the first rides we did. And then I wrote about how I purchased my first Harley. And then I just kind of worked my way forward from there. And so I started right around, in the book, you start right around 2001. I just figured that was a good time to start, because what was one of the big things that happened that year, we all remember, was 9/11.
Right.
And in the book, I write where I was during 9/11 and when that happened. And that was right around the time I bought my first motorcycle. And, and one didn't have anything to do with the other. Again, 9/11 was not the reason I went out and got a motorcycle. It was just that's one of those things that I think everybody can relate to is, where were we at that time in 2001? What were we all doing?
Right.
And so that was the starting point. And then the dates just kind of went from there. And the thing was, and I did some editing after I contacted you guys, and even before I sent it in, because doing my research, at one point, I think I hit, I want to say 120,000 words. And I was like, let me take some of these rides out, or let me take some of these other police experiences out. And there was some trepidation there. I'll be honest with you. When I refer to people that I know that I rode with, or especially people in law enforcement, I don't refer to them by a name. You're never going to know the name of my police department because, again, I didn't want any liability or someone coming back to me and accusing me of something. But I promise you, everything in there is the truth from my observation and my experiences. But when I read it, there were some things that I was like, that really doesn't help the story, or I don't think that it may slow things down. So I took it out.
Okay.
So, but everything is still in that linear motion. It starts around 2001 and then all the way up to the end of 2022 when I retired.
Is there a turning point or a standout moment in your book?
The turning point was 2 periods when you read the book.
Okay.
Around 2014, I was having a really hard time in my career. As many law enforcement people go through that. Mine, luckily and thankfully, didn't involve alcohol or anything like that, which is very common, or suicidal thoughts in law enforcement because of the job that we do.
Right.
Mine was dealing with an administration at my department at the time. And there was a turning point where we had a change in administration at my department. And I talk about that in the book. And it made things a lot different for me. The second thing that was the turning point in the book was the death of Steve. And that was the turning point. It was one of the things I wrote about towards the latter third of the book, is trying to deal with that death, finally coming out the other side and realizing that riding, what riding a motorcycle did for me, is still something that was an important part of my life, and I wasn't about to give it up. And, if there was kind of a third thing that I write in the book, it's not a major point, was the realization that it was time to get out of law enforcement. And at the time I was in an undercover position. I was working narcotics. I was on a DEA task force working with the federal government. I was sitting I remember it like yesterday because I read about it in the book. It was in February. I was sitting in the back of a car, freezing my ass off, watching some asshole's house that it was a target of mine that was dealing heroin. And I was sitting in the back of the car in the early morning hours, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. I didn't have the same drive, or I didn't have the same intent anymore. And that realization came, and I wrote about that it was time to move on and do something in my life while I still had my health, even though I'm not a young man anymore. But, hey, it was time to do something else.
Right. I think everybody reaches that point in their lives. That's something everybody can relate to, where, you're in a job that you love, and at some point you go, well, you got to weigh it out. You got to weigh it out. What other things you want to do in your life.
Exactly. And the book talks about that because the riding helped. The rides after that point into that spring and summer of 2022, there was a lot of thought processes because I used riding my motorcycle. I use it as a way to clear my mind and to think. It's my time away to kind of work through things. Not only was the stress of the job, but in this one, trying to figure out what's the next step in my life. And so, that was a perfect thing to talk about.
Now you say you're keeping all identities, your police department, everything is a secret. Does that make it difficult for you to go out and talk about this book?
No. Most of the people, as a matter of fact, my chief of police knows about the book. Most of the people that I work with, my department, but they know I didn't want, and then again, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal because believe me, I know this book is not going to win a Pulitzer and it's not going to be a bestseller. I wrote this for me. The second thing was I was hoping a few people would read it and enjoy the story. But I didn't want, if by chance someone read it and showed up one day, I didn't want them to go in and say, Scott wrote this. Can you tell me about this? Because I do talk about 2 or 3 cases that made national news at the time. In 2003, I was part of a small task force that had worked the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping, and I talk about that in the book. I talk about one of my last drug cases that I was working in a part of the state, and at the same time, I was dealing with a police department, and a law enforcement agency was dealing with the Gabby Petito issue.
Oh, geez.
And it caused problems for my investigation. And so because of those 2 things, I didn't want somebody to sit there, come to me, because again, on those cases, there's certain things I know and certain things I don't know. And I didn't want to put anybody in the position or do it like when somebody writes a biography or tell-all book about that. That's not what this was about. That was the main thing. That was the other reason to try to put some anonymity in there, is because this book is, again, it's primarily about riding a motorcycle. It's not a book just about law enforcement. Law enforcement was just part of the story. It's not the whole story.
Right.
The other reason being is I'm very honest about some of my observations. What I, as an law enforcement officer for almost 30 years, there are things that I'm honest about, and some of the people I work with, because I worked with some people inside the job of law enforcement that were useless. And, you know, when I referred to them about that, about some of the things that they did, and there were some things that I took out because, again, I thought that it might put it to a point that it might bring some negativity back towards me and my family. I removed it out before I sent it in to you guys, because, you know, we see these things. And I write about that in the book as well, is the current sentiment towards law enforcement. I saw that right at the beginning of COVID and after George Floyd, which really angered me. Because most people, when it comes to law enforcement, they believe what they see on TV and the news, and it's not that way. But that doesn't mean, like any profession, there aren't people that are in the job that shouldn't be, or there are people that are not good people. And I unfortunately came across a few people like that in my career. But those are my opinions.
Right.
They're mine. You know, and I'm not making a statement to the general public about him, her, whoever. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to be more anonymous with how I talked about it.
Right.
But the situations were real, and the people that know about this book and have read it that either worked for my department or in law enforcement that work with me. I had a friend of mine that called me up the other day. He's currently living in Louisiana. He read the book and he told me on the phone 2 weeks ago, he said, "You were spot on. Everything you wrote about that person was spot on." Yeah. And because for him, it was a hard time. For him, he says it brought up a lot of negative emotions. And I said, yeah. I said, because that was the type of person this individual was. And he goes, "You're right."
Yeah.
So yeah.
Feels good to write about those people too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, yeah. Are you interested in going out to the local library, the local bookstore, social media to promote your book?
Yeah, I am not a social media person for obvious reasons. The only social media that I ever used to do with like Snapchat and Instagram was when I was buying dope. And so, you know, I don't use it for other things, and those undercover accounts have long been since shut down. But, you know, just doing some research on my own, I did set up a Facebook authors page about a week and a half ago.
Great. Where do we find you?
It's under Scott Christopher, of course, and you should be able to find it on the search on Facebook. I put in a few pictures. Matter of fact, I uploaded something about Daytona Bike Week because I know to keep the page fresh.
All right. Scott Christopher, Riding the Blue Line. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. You know, sometimes you have to retire to find out what you really want to do, such is the case for Steve Holt. He's published a book of poetry entitled The Pagan Rain.
I started writing poetry in my middle years. I taught in an independent school system for 43 years, and for the last 25 of that, I taught at Ohio University, the Southern campus. After I was through, I began writing. I know that sounds strange, but it never occurred to me that I would be a writer. And I started thinking how much I liked poetry, how much I loved teaching it. And I thought, you know, if a fellow says he likes poetry and likes to teach it, he should be able to write one. I did. I wrote a few and sent them, got them accepted in journals, and off I went. And I've done it since. So I'm working on a 20-some year career that was accidental. I'm old. I don't.
Define old.
Oh, yes, true. I don't feel old, so.
Yeah, I know. Me neither. But you got your poems published.
Yes.
Which is pretty impressive.
Well, I was a little surprised because I had a friend who's a writer. You know, I'm from Northeast Kentucky, and I knew him. He's from Central Kentucky and a professor at Eastern Kentucky University, which is my undergraduate school. We're good friends, and he said, he said, "Steve, if you're starting to write," he said, don't be disappointed if at first your poems are turned down. He said, that happens to everybody. And I took that to heart, but I sent my poems out and they were taken. So I felt pretty good about that.
Wait, what are your poems about? Everything?
No, critics have called me a landscape poet. What I do have landscape in my work, but the landscape is the back a drop for human behavior. I'm not out there saying, oh, how pretty roses are. I don't do that. I mean, but I describe the landscape, and I believe what Eudora Welty said. People talk about in fiction, and they'll say, plot, setting, character, and all that. And they always emphasize plot. And she said, it isn't plot. It isn't character. She said it's setting, because setting is what controls people's behavior. That's my poetry. Nature poetry, but it's people.
Can you give me an example? Can you read one to me?
Yes, I guess before I even read it, I should say I was inspired by the Salem witches trial in 1619 or 92, I guess, 1692. And this came out of that. Okay. It's called John Proctor Speaks Privately on All Saints' Eve. Times have I entered these dark woods where a white moon shines holy, where wind makes bare-boned limbs thrum like taut harps or lyres attuned, where dry leaves rattle in my wake as if shades claw out of the netherworld, where oft is heard the yap of fox and cry of owl affirming bloodlust. Yet know I too the nightingale's song that purifies the savage in us all. In truth, upon my shadowed forest pathway have I met no dusky stranger, resting on a stone, staff in hand, designing to dupe me into perdition. Such time as this should ne'er be feared. Of unnatural effects there be none. Thank you.
Wow. Ooh.
You like it at all?
Yeah, I do. Why the title The Pagan Rain?
The title poem is The Pagan Rain came to me as I was sitting in a doctor's office, because I'd taken my wife to an appointment up in Barboursville, West Virginia. I always take things to read. And that day, I didn't. I took my notebook, my journal, and I keep things in, and a pen. Well, while she was in there, I was just fiddling around, and I thought, oh, I have an idea. And I wrote this poem based on a trip we had taken into Maryland, just on the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, to Catoctin Mountain. And I was fascinated because I drove off the main road on purpose. It was a hard rainstorm, but I wanted to see this mountain. I love landscapes. So I started driving. And as it turned out, the drive was almost straight down. Rain was pouring both sides. Of the road. I was trying to stay in the road, rocky and cold. And I just loved that drive. And so I imagined a poem based on it. But my poem is something that sort of alludes to ancient times, Greek times, that kind of thing. Okay. And that poem came out of it. And that was the very first poem I wrote that turned into this book, very first one. And when I was finished and knew I had a book, I thought, where is a title? And then it occurred to me, this poem, this title, because the whole book, and I intended this, the whole book is a kind of a spiritual journey, some of it very personal. And it sort of shows the part of people that I'm not saying is negative, but just there's a lot of darkness in people and there's a lot of light. And I tried very hard to take a spiritual journey, not a religious journey, a spiritual journey that emphasized all aspects of our natures. And I have The Pagan Rain here. You care if I read it? It's small.
Okay.
All right. The Pagan Rain. This is all my memory of having been there. The pagan rain on Catoctin Mountain penetrates a hood of trees, shocks and batters rocks, chills the wild underbrush, unclothes falls flowers, dives like rousing thought into frothy shutters of current, and joins the mad chatter of shoots before calming to the loose ends of desire in waters of cold gold-cupped leaves, fit to waft an autumnal newborn goddess toward an iced, aged shore.
Steve, do you read your poems publicly?
Oh, yes. I had a reading not too long ago in Barboursville, West Virginia. Again, we can be in West Virginia in 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that's the last reading I had. But oh yeah, I've had readings all over Kentucky, and I've read and taught at workshops in at universities and colleges in not just Kentucky but Ohio as well as Tennessee and North Carolina mostly. The Upper South, I'll just call that. That's primarily where I've read.
That's amazing. What a great second act you're having.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
I've had some. Yeah, I have had some rewards. I was nominated for a pushcart prize, which I really did not expect and was really happy about. And I got the James Still. There's a man called. He lived for 95 years. His name was James Still, Still. He is known as the Dean of Appalachian Poets, and I'm always considered, when my books are published, and it's the Library of Congress kind of describing what I do, they always consider me an Appalachian poet, and I haven't necessarily always set my landscapes in Appalachia. However, I understand that's where I am on the cusp of it. And so that then has led me into a kind of branching out, and I've been called I won a James Still Award. It's kind of impressive here in Kentucky, at least on the eastern half of the state of Kentucky, especially. James Still is revered. When I won that, I have to be honest, I was shakily happy. I really was.
Aw,
and I don't mean to boast, because I have written some terrible poems, and I knew when I was done that's awful.
We're terrible, right? I know. All right. What a journey. Steve Holt, author of The Pagan Rain. Thank you so much.
Well, Alice, I appreciate this. You're very kind. Thank you.
A special education teacher's aide and mother of two in Ohio. When Jennifer Koons was faced with nothing to do, she wrote a book. It's entitled Longing. When did this happen?
I got bored over Christmas break in 23 because obviously I work at a school, so we're off, and just kind of started typing. And then I let my mom and my best friend and my sister read it when I was done. And they were like, you should send it in. It's actually pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, right, whatever. So then I did. And then I had 2 publishers that really liked it. So
you said you wrote unofficially before this?
I had the late 80s, early 90s kid, diary with the lock and the key. And
what'd you do with that?
I do not have them anymore. Kind of wish I did. Be interested to see what I had written in there then.
Yeah, right.
But I will say it is funny. I still talk to one of my high school English teachers pretty often. She actually still lives and is affiliated with, because I actually work in the school district that I went to. So I kind of see them often, and she always teases me. I was one of those kids that was what they call an overwriter. I always wrote too much. When you had to write a paper, some kids are struggling to get the 6 pages out. I was the one that turned in 9, and she was always like, what are you doing?
So it's funny that the name of your book is Longing, and it's about a girl in high school with big dreams who doesn't seem to know which way she wants to go. So maybe you should have kept that little journal.
Right.
What was the inspiration for this?
Just where I'm from in Ohio, I think a lot of us kind of struggle with that, whether wanting to stay home or kind of adventure out, because that's what the main character in the book kind of deals with. She's always kind of wanted to go to a school in a different part of the country and explore and learn and stuff like that. But then she kind of struggles with wanting to be at home where her family and her friends and everybody is. And then throughout the book, certain things happen to where she's still struggling with that, but now even more so going towards the end, she never thought she would end up picking.
What happens?
She ends up staying home, and kind of fulfilling her dreams, college and whatnot and all that, closer to where she's from. just because certain things happen with family members and a love interest she's kind of always had. And
Does this follow your life at all?
a little bit. There are aspects of her personality and characteristics in the book that are a lot like me. I've had two of my cousins say, "That's so much like you," and I'm like, "I know." Um, I will say, I guess the college part, yes, but like there were different things for me that made it to where I kind of stayed close to home. I always wanted to go away to college. My dad actually ended up being very ill for a large amount of time. He had very bad heart disease, ended up needing a transplant, um, stuff like that. So there was times when I was mostly like at our community college or doing college online just because, of the personal things. So I kind of relate to her in that way, I guess, where you have this plan, but then like life kind of throws you some curveballs to where you kind of have to alter the plan.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Why is this specific to Ohioans?
Um,
You said that a lot of people in Ohio kind of feel
I
that
don't
way. Like,
Right. I don't know if it's because, I mean, I will say it is kind of a Midwestern thing. And we start that. We start the Midwest. Um,
right.
I don't know if it's because we do have kind of like the large amount of community colleges. A lot of the high schools we go to, I know all the ones in our county, you have the opportunity to get scholarships for like your first 2 years covered there. So I think that kind of goes towards the decision for a lot of students because, yes, you can go away and have that experience, but at the same time, you could also stay home and for your first years go to school for
Hmm.
free.
That's great.
So, right. So I think that's kind of, the struggle.
Okay. Are we still longing by the end of the book?
No, she's made her choice.
So now what?
Well, right. That's so funny. That's exactly what my mother said. She's like, you need to write a second book so that we find out where the characters go. And I'm like, okay, like, and I'm not against it at all. I'm probably trying to figure out where I want them to go. My only thing with it is I wish it was a little bit longer, having never done this before and just kind of writing and then sending it off. It is kind of a shorter novel. Um, but yeah, I am open to writing a sequel or a second book in kind of like a small series because I have had several people tell me that I should because they want to know what happened to them.
So longing leaves you longing for more.
Yes.
What are the names of your main characters?
Well, those are definitely like me. Josette is the name of the main character. That was actually because, oddly enough, I'm very into like old TV and sitcoms and old shows. Not a huge reality TV person. So I was actually watching the old Dark Shadows show.
My mouth is on the floor because my mother, when I was a little girl, would come and pick us up. There was four of us, pick us up, and we had to get home in time for Dark Shadows.
Well, that was my mom. She said they used to race home after school every day. And so, like, and I like my daughter and I both are kind of like horror movie ghost story kind of people. So I just was sitting home that Christmas break watching it because we have a couple apps that have the whole series. And so then that's how I came up with Josette. She ends up being called Joe, which is because Little Women has always been my favorite book, and Joe is always my favorite character. So that was where I kind of added that in. And then the other main character, his name is Luca. And that was because for years, when I was going to have a boy, that's what I was going to name him, even though that's not what I did. His name is Brody.
Oh,
How that happened, I don't know. But yeah, for years I was gonna, if I ever had a son, I was gonna name him Luca. So now he's just a character in my book.
so you took a lot of pieces of your life and poured it into this book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably it's fun. It's a cool experience. Like you never think that someone's gonna like just what you're kind of rambling on about. It's sitting in your living room in your laptop.
Yeah. Are you talking about it?
Yeah, there's a place in the staff lounge where we can put stuff if like we have some who have like kids, their kids have like small businesses and stuff. They'll put like the business cards and stuff. So right now my book and like a fact sheet about it is there. I have had some coworkers read it, who like it. I I have two that I'm very close with that when I was given 10 copies, the first 10. So then obviously like I signed them and gave those two a copy and they read it and liked it. And I'm like, be nice. I don't exactly know what I'm doing, but so it's fun.
How did it feel when you got the book in the mail?
Very cool because I will say we get a lot of Amazon boxes here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like a brown box, and my husband had went out and got it. And I kind of figured it was just something I had ordered. Because they didn't exactly say for sure when we were going to be getting them. And then I opened it and it was cool to have my name on the front of it. And I said that to my mother. I was like, even if it isn't like the greatest success in the world, it's still cool to have something published out there with your name on it.
That's great. All right. Jennifer Koons, Longing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
83 years young, Ron Finch knew he had to do something when he retired at 75. Become an author. Next thing he knew, he wrote over 60 books and finally decided to publish one of them. It's entitled The Journey. What happened to the other books you wrote?
Most of them are self-published, right?
Okay.
And then The Journey is the first one I did with Page Publishing.
Okay. So this is a Canadian thriller full of mystery and suspense. Somebody wakes up on the side of the road. What's going on? Doesn't know where he is. Where did this story come from? What was your inspiration?
Well, I don't know. It's amazing, you know. I'll sit down to write, and you can tell. Obviously, I write every day. I'm kind of a fanatic about it, and quite often I just started a book the other day, and I didn't. All of a sudden, I'm writing about something. I'm going, why? Where did that come from? Gosh, now I'm going to have to fit that into the story. I'm going to have to make the book. Okay. Well, what part of the reason where this came from is because this guy is a little younger than I am. And he gets up one morning. He has to go and meet his friend Whitey. I think it says that later on in the synopsis. And he gets in the car and he heads towards a small town, and he has an accident, right? And when he comes to in this wooded area, he's got off the road into a wooded area, hit a tree. When he comes to, he doesn't know who he is, where he is, what's going on. He just knows. You know, it's sort of a subliminal threat. He knows that his life is in danger, and he's so frightened there that he kind of creeps around in the woods there to try and look around, and he's not sure how he's going to get a ride. He doesn't know where he's going to go, and then the story goes on and on and on as he still doesn't know, but he knows they're trying to kill him, and they really are. And of course, you don't find that out till the end of the story. And he goes on this journey. And that's where the title came from. And he's always trying to stay one step ahead. He thinks somebody's seen him, or somebody's a little bit of paranoia, but some of it's real. He thinks somebody's seen him, so he has to leave there. So then he, you know, bumps into somebody who becomes his friend, who he trusts. He takes him along with him, and they go on this adventure, whatever you want to call it. And it turns out that, yes, someone was trying to kill him. Now, about 3/4 of the way through the roof, you know, the author has to have a reason to fit things together. He falls off a roof. It's only one story, bangs his head, he comes to, and he starts to remember things. And then he goes, oh, now I know who's trying to get me. Now I know where they are. But it's kind of complicated because the police, there are a couple of policemen who are employed, shall I say, by this other group that's trying to get him. So he can't go to the police. Eventually it all works out, but it's a lot of fun. And I was tired out by the time I finished the book.
You're tired out.
Because I'm going, here, there, everywhere. Now what happens next, right? And he does eventually get back home. But for a while, I mean, they've got drones looking for him. The drone spots the car, but he's not in the car. He's on the national news, and he's in the house when he's on the news. Someone's taking him in, and he doesn't know what they'll do, of course, when they find out who he is. And he won't watch the news because he doesn't know whether he wants to find out who he is. I mean, it's kind of complicated, but it's a lot of fun, and it does end up, of course, as as a good mystery should, with the good guy winning,
Well,
right?
that's nice.
So to speak. But still leaves you with a couple of questions. I wonder about. But where does it come from? I don't know. Years ago, and a woman came in to see me about her son, and after I talked to her, she was I don't know whether she was the mayor of the town or whatever. After talking to me for a couple of minutes, she said, "You're a ripple thinker, aren't you?" And I said, "What do you mean? I'm a scatterbrain?" She says, "No. I mean, thoughts connect to thoughts, connect to thoughts, connect to thoughts." And I think that's what happens with me. I get these thoughts and I can connect it to something else.
With all the books that you've written, do people know who you are in your community?
A bit, but not, first of all, I'm not young,
Okay.
right? I was over 75, just barely when I started writing. And occasionally my name appears in the local paper and something about my latest book, but I know I'm not that well known. Discover me, right?
Are you out talking about your books?
The only place I was able to go is I went to the local museum, not as an exhibit, but as a speaker. And
Okay.
It was well attended. I had a lot of fun because in a lot of my mysteries, there's a ghost involved or ghosts involved. So that drew a certain crowd. But
Okay.
I can talk extemporaneously for 6 weeks.
Okay, I believe you.
I just wanted to tell you one quick one if I could, and then you're probably
Go
going to
ahead.
say, well, it's interesting. Things seem to happen, and I don't know why. Like last summer, I wrote a book, and it's in 2036. Okay, there's a setting.
Okay. Yeah.
And the important countries in the setting are the United States and Greenland.
Okay. Oh, get out.
And I'm going, what? Like now I'm going, what? Then I didn't. But because a lot of the story was between the two countries, and because Nuuk is the capital of Greenland, for about 6 weeks I kept getting information from the Nuuk airport on what the weather conditions were like. Because you go on research, right?
Right.
I don't need to know that. So, but I'm just saying, and then I go, wow, coincidence? What? What is it, right?
It's like you had a premonition.
Yeah. And let me tell you also, going back to the book we're talking about, The Journey. I wrote that, a year and a half ago or more. And then about a few months later, I thought, probably when I contacted Paige, I thought, that reminds me of a TV show I used to watch, The Fugitive.
That was a great show.
Never thought of it before. Right? Guess who the star in the movie was?
Who?
Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harrison Ford and Ron Finch were both born on July the 13th, 1942.
That's some interesting coincidences.
I know it's just a coincidence. I wrote a book in 2019, and it was, they went back in family history, and there was a lot of talk about the Spanish influenza.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's quite a bit about the Spanish influenza. Guess what happens a year later?
COVID.
Yeah. This has happened to me about 4 or 5 times. It's not going to stop me from writing.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Hey, in 2036, it is kind of weird, and things do happen, but none of it is catastrophic, okay? But you will say, yeah, I can see that would happen. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Ron Finch, author of The Journey. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for listening.
You never know when a story you told your little ones to help them understand something complicated might make a good book. Take The Atom and the Molecule, for example, by J. Kendall Horton Sr.
I have two kids, both boys. Our oldest was an infant / toddler, and my wife used to make stuff up, bedtime stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, she would just make stuff up, and it was hers was water molecules and atoms making clouds and raining and stuff like that. So she used the characters from Madagascar, believe it or not. And made it up. And I said, "Hon, you should write that down. You should, And years go by. Life happens, right?
Yeah.
So every 3-4 years, I would say, "Hon, we should write a book." Yeah, and then she said, yeah. So it goes on and on. So about a year ago, maybe end of March, beginning of April, I said, "You know what? I'm not getting, number one, I'm not getting any younger. Number two, I wanna do something, right? Because I figured, I'm not gonna work forever, right? So I'm like, So I thought back, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna write my own. That's when I decided that I wanted it to be educational, right? But also tell a story. That's not easily done. But first I figured out what I wanted to write about. And I said, okay, let me do science. And then I said, okay, let me find out what happens when you put certain molecules with certain atoms. And, I did some research, and that's what I came up with. And I started writing. So it took me 2.5, 3 months in between working and stuff like that. So, and then I submitted it to Fulton.
Give me the story of Mia and Andy, two unlikely companions that discover the power of unity.
Yeah, right. Mia is a molecule.
She's made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atoms. She loved to dance.
Yeah.
And then there was Andy.
Correct.
Tell me about Andy.
Andy, he was shy. Mia was a water molecule. Andy was a atom. All the other molecules, atoms, were around. Mia, saw that Adam was shy. They started talking to one another, and Mia said, why don't we combine and make something good for life, for the world. So they got together and they formed water. So they went to all of the continents in the world and spent time and with the animals and the environment, and and that's really what it is.
Well, it's just such a creative way to educate
Yeah.
kids. Or, I can tell you the truth, in high school, this would have helped me out a lot because I didn't get chemistry at all.
Right.
It's something as simple, to simplify something that, you think is so complicated when really it's not.
Yeah, it's like I said, I wanted it to be educational,
Right.
right? But I wanted it to tell a story as well. So, like I said, it's not really easy to combine the two, but it can be done. I mean, without being politically correct, we'll say, right?
I can't even see politics in this. I don't know. What are you talking?
No, it's not. But like I said, it's more, I wanted it to be educational and fun for, we'll say, preschool to 2nd grade, 3rd grade.
Okay.
I am in the process. I'm constructing an email so I can reach out to libraries.
Okay.
So I'm doing that, and hopefully, because I had the press release, just a fairly short email. I don't want to make it so long that they don't read it, right?
Right.
And I'll put a link into the link into the press release itself, kind of, and try to introduce it that way.
Any more books like this coming?
I've got 3 more actually. They'll be in the same series. This is going to be like a series. I don't know how long yet, this particular series, but I do have one, two, three that are in the works and are close to actually being done. But I would just want to, get this one out there, and then I'll wrap up the other three and get them out there as soon as I can.
Great. J. Kendall Horton Sr., The Atom and the Molecule. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Rhonda Parsons has been writing most of her life, and now she's put some of her stories and poems together in her book, Take 5. Rhonda, I feel like this book is taking us on your spiritual journey.
I would say that is a good call, yes. I have stories and poems that are kind of based on my personal experience, where I can, the Native American concept of hearing nature and the trees and rocks talking.
Yes.
That is something that I can do too. So I have stories like Follow the Rainbow, which has my gift in it. And
what do you mean your gift? Explain.
Well, the character that I developed for Follow the Rainbow, he is somebody who learned life's lessons from his parents who used nature to teach him. There's various examples like the snowflakes and how they have different shapes and patterns, and that represent diversity of humanity. And at the end of the story, the boy lost his grandpa and he's missing him, and his parents used the setting of the sun to remind him that they'll see him again, the setting and the rising of the sun. So there's no real separation when people pass on.
Your book is a combination of short stories and poems.
Yes.
Is it a collection of things you have written over the years?
Oh, definitely. I think Take 5 has more of my newer stuff in it than my older stuff. I'm a member of the Writers Guild, and I think back in 2014, I published another book with them, and that has more of my older stuff in it.
Okay. What's a standout story for you in this book?
Well, I love Follow the Rainbow. That would be a standout story. And the other standout story for me is All the Colors of the Heart. And that is actually a story that I wrote previously, and I had originally put in the book that I did with the Rockford Writers Guild. So that one was really important for me to include it in this one.
Tell me about it.
Well, the character I create for that book is a little boy, and I'm kind of getting emotional thinking about it.
It's okay.
Because he gets visits from rainbow angels, and every rainbow angel has a special message that tells him how to make the world a better place. And I guess maybe the reason why I feel so emotional is because of the current situation in America. Even we really need that gift and how the knowledge that those angels bring. So
tell me about the knowledge the angel brings.
Okay, I'm going to read a page. Okay, reading this paragraph. Okay. 9 weeks later, I had my second angelic encounter. And once again, God colored my room with 9 rainbows. She was beautiful, like the first, but her body didn't sparkle, and there wasn't a single rose in her hair. I don't know how she got in my room. I just saw the light bounce off the prism, and there she was. She told me she was an orange angel. She had shown me 2 shadow boxes, and one shadow box had a man carrying a wooden beam on his back. The other shadow box had a man sitting in a black pit. I wondered why she was seeing these images until I touched the boxes with her fingers, and all at once the figures came to life. And as the action unfolded, I felt like I was witnessing history. For me, the intent with this book is a joy that nobody can take away from you, because it's not based on temporary material stuff. It's more an internal joy. That is my intention.
Okay. Are you going to keep writing?
I feel most fulfilled and joyful when I do. It's part of my purpose. And when I was younger, I was in a store and there was a quote about your talent being a gift from God, and what you do with your talent is your gift to the world. And then there was this moment in my life when it was an unusual winter and there was patches of grass where there was no snow. And I actually kind of heard the world is waiting for your vision in that bare patch of grass. So I have to write it. It's who I am. So yes.
Are you able to get out and share your stories publicly?
When I first started writing, I was scared to do that, and I would take my poems and just file them away in my drawer. And then when I got older, I met people who were performing their poetry live. So then I started doing that, and I've been going to open mics and talent shows, and I will share.
That's awesome, Rhonda. That's great that you overcame that fear.
I don't know if I really overcame it. I just make a point to challenge myself. And if I'm afraid, I still get out there and do it, because people do need to hear my words, you know.
Well, good for you, Rhonda. Rhonda Parsons, author of Take 5. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I caught up with Jimmy Schaefer in Maui at 4:45 in the morning, where he's building houses. It's a long way from 2009 when he got into an accident and found writing. It led to his book entitled Political Suicide. Jimmy, what happened?
I got in an accident and lost a lot of the use of my left arm and hand, so I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And while I was awake, I just decided to start writing.
Is this the first book that you've ever...
This is the first book I published. I didn't have a educated background, so it took me a long time to actually learn to write and make it legible.
Okay.
Especially one-handed. I didn't know how to type, so I type every letter with one finger.
Oh, Jimmy, that must have taken forever.
But I have like 5 or 6 more that are waiting. If this thing takes off, I'm going to be fine.
What inspired Political Suicide?
Just a thought I had, and I turned it into a story. It was like I was trying to write nonfiction, but they wouldn't let me write nonfiction because I didn't have an education. Don't have all the background.
Who wouldn't let you write nonfiction?
I tried to submit something to American Science Journal, and they gave me this spiel about, you need to go to college and you have to have a degree and a doctorate and all that. So I thought, well, they can't stop me from writing fiction. So I turned what I was originally writing, which was supposed to be nonfiction, into fiction. Okay. And I started having so much fun with it. I've been just playing with it for years and having a good time.
So what's it about?
Oh, what I did was I took current society, how you got the political divisive nature of America the last few years, and pandemic and climate change and all that. So I took it, put it prior to the Ice Age, but I kept our current society. And the characters are, instead of being different races, colors of people, it's different humanoid characters. So I got Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, and humans, with the humans being the ones running the world. And the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons are trying to get the respect that they obviously deserve, being equal. But the whole thing is about this guy created a fertilizer. Him and his wife, they worked together. They created a fertilizer, and when they did the first test, it killed Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals, but the humans that were involved survived. His grandfather's a weapons developer, and he thought, hey, I can turn this into a genocide weapon. And when the Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals went on strike, the whole world wants to get this weapon from this guy, but it's a flawed weapon. Ultimately, it not only does its job, but it creates the Ice Age. And at the end of it, the DNA from the crossbreeding people turn into the different colors of humans that we have today. You have a strike going on, and the Neanderthals decide to attack the humans. And they use the weapon to kill the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons. And it works the first time. They don't realize if they use it a second time that it's going to destroy the environment. And the guy that invented it is trying to convince everybody not to use it again, but they do. And he's in a race to try to save the world from the oncoming Ice Age and save as many people as he can. And ultimately, they managed to save humanity, but the Ice Age does take the world over.
So it's called political suicide.
Yeah.
What does the title mean?
The world politics decided to destroy the world.
The world politics?
Various governments of the world all got together and decided they wanted to basically put the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons, in their place. And so they decided to use the weapon against them, but it ended up killing the entire world. So it was political suicide.
It was suicide.
Yeah. They destroyed the world eventually. So, it's suicidal.
So are you going to keep writing?
Oh, I write every day. That's why I'm awake at this time in the morning. I write before I go to work.
What are you writing now?
Oh, I got one called Days of Heaven. I'm on the third book of that series. It's all about it's kind of like my version of the way that humans came to be, how we became this screwed up, and and it's been a lot of fun writing. It's about I take a lot of names from the Bible, obviously, because I call it Days of Heaven, and I just change the characters around, and I'm having so much fun writing that one.
Great. Okay.
I got another one. I call it Secrets. It's all about how Julius Caesar actually found America.
All right. That should be interesting. Jimmy Schaefer, political suicide. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.